In this episode, we're going to go through these 7 must-track metrics that if you actually track these, you'll make more money. Surprise. It sounds like a bold claim, but this is something that I get really excited about because I love metrics. I love analytics. I love data. I love all these nerdy things, which is why I have this podcast and why most freelancers don't have a podcast about business, because most freelancers don't give a shit about metrics and data and analytics and spreadsheets. But there's a quote, it's an old quote that goes back. I think Peter Drucker said this: what gets measured gets managed. And to put that in human terms that everyone can understand is it is infinitely easier to affect change in something if we are actually tracking it. If you are wanting to actually lose weight, just weigh yourself every day. There's a lot of just mental junk up there that keeps you from doing that. Just like there's a lot of mental junk up there that keep people from tracking their finances because they don't want to know how bad it's going. I can tell you, I can look you straight in the eye, and I can confidently say, if you weigh yourself every day, it's easier to manage your weight. If you track your finances every day, it's easier to save money. Make sure that the money's going where it should. And just like those two things, if you track these 7 metrics in your business, it is easier to affect change on these metrics. And if you can positively influence these metrics in your business, it is absolutely impossible not to make more money. And it starts with tracking. Most freelancers just ignore this most basic fundamental thing of tracking metrics. So you end up living your life only seeing what's called lagging indicators. These are the things that are the result of all the leading indicators, the things you actually want to start tracking. So when you look at your bank account and it's dwindling or to zero or below zero, you're in massive debt and going deeper into debt every month, that is actually a result of some of these 7 metrics that we're going to talk about today not being in alignment, not being good. So when you see your bank account dwindling and you wait to the last minute to fix that, it is likely too late. Because those low numbers in your bank account that you're experiencing right now in your business or in your personal life, it's a direct result of what you did weeks or months or sometimes even a year plus ago in your business. Or in other cases, it's things that you didn't do weeks, months, or even a year plus ago in your business. So this episode, we're going to dive into these 7 must-track metrics that if you actually track these, and we can start to make influences on these things that we're tracking, we'll work on actually improving these things in the rest of 2024 into 2025, you will make more money. And at a bare minimum, you should be tracking these things on a monthly basis. Again, I'll give you the 7 you need to be tracking, but I just looked into my own business and I was just curious, like, how many metrics do I track? How often do I track them? There are 31 metrics in my business that I track daily. There's also other metrics that my team reports to me on that I don't personally track, but they're responsible for bringing to me. But that's still 31 that I personally track and keep up to date daily. But I didn't start there. Please, God, don't go off and just make a spreadsheet of 31 different data points that you're trying to track. You won't know what to do with all of them, but these are the 7 big ones. And these 7 big ones are on my daily tracking spreadsheet for my business metrics as well. If you do this, this is going to bring so much clarity in your business. You're going to see exactly what the weak points are, the parts that you really need to put your focus, time, effort, energy on to fix, because you can't lie to yourself. These are just numbers. The numbers don't have an opinion. The numbers do not have feelings. The numbers do not care about your feelings. The numbers really don't care about your opinions. The numbers are just telling you how it is. And if you can just accept that and know that they're there to help you, this can be so much better for you over the next year. And one of the coolest parts of this is you can actually start predicting your income. One of the most terrifying things as a freelancer, especially once you step into this full time, you have a family and you have people that rely on you. This can get really terrifying. And the reason that's terrifying is because there's just an inherent lack of predictability in what you're going to get paid. So if you have a day job, I'm getting paid this much every month, more or less. Maybe there's bonuses involved or something, but generally speaking, I'm getting paid this much. But as a freelancer or any business owner, that predictability is basically gone. Except if you really track your metrics well, you do it diligently, you can start to really project what you're going to earn over the next month, 3 months, 6 months, even a year in advance. And just in this example, last month, over a month ago, I was $690 off of my projected revenue. I was actually $690 over my projected revenue. So I was 0.6% off of my projected revenue, 0.6%, that's less than 1%, for something that I was going to earn 30 days from now. And I'm also on pace for the projected revenue I had for the whole year. And when you can do this, there's this peace of mind. Now it's not just me and my family. I have 7 other full-time people and they have kids and they have families that they depend on them for. So I am now responsible for many lives, but I wouldn't have the peace of mind that I have right now and the confidence that I have right now if I didn't track these metrics on a daily basis. Or at the very least, for some of you who are not at the place yet where you have that level of stability and predictability, because some of these numbers that we're going to be tracking are really bad right now, you're going to at least have what we call the canary in the coal mine. Back in the old days, I think a lot of coal mines are out now. I think the UK actually just phased out of using coal for electricity this year. I read something about that in Morning Brew recently. But anyways, they would bring canaries down to the coal mines, and canaries are really sensitive to carbon monoxide. So they'd alert the coal miners before carbon monoxide built up to the point where it killed people. They're essentially the early warning system. These 7 metrics, if you track them, these are your early warning systems that if something is looking bad, you have time to fix them before they kill your business. So you can start to see why I'm so excited about these 7 metrics. And shout out, by the way, to Josh Maitland. He actually emailed me like yesterday. It was like, hey, dude, have you ever done an episode on metrics? It'd be cool to see like the top 6 business metrics you should be tracking. And so literally I was like, what metrics would I track if I were just to sit down and talk through this? And so this episode comes from you, Josh. So thanks for that. I came up with 7, not 6. So apologies for not getting the exact number you wanted, but I feel like you'll be happy with at least these 7 here. Plus I have a bonus one in here as well. So if you've never listened to this podcast before, hello, I'm Brian. This is the 6-Figure Creative Podcast. This is for creative freelancers who offer freelance services, who want to make more money from their freelance services without selling their soul. If that sounds like you, this is the podcast for you. And this is a really good episode for you. I cannot think of a less soul-selling way of making more money because you're not hurting anyone. You're not taking advantage of anyone. You're not taking on projects that you don't want to take on. You're literally just tracking numbers so that you can better understand yourself and your business. And there comes a time where if you want to have a business with the revenue goals that you have and you want to be a big boy or big girl business, you got to do big boy or big girl things in your business. You got to get out of your diapers, right? And if any of you have had day jobs or have worked at big agencies doing creative work, all of these businesses and all of these agencies likely track these 7 metrics at a bare minimum. These are all things that every business at a higher level does. And so we can take some of these things. We don't have to track 31 daily metrics like your podcast host, Brian, who's obsessed about this stuff. You just track these 7 on a monthly basis and you will be better off for it. Now, I really recommend updating some of these on a weekly basis. Once you understand the 7 we're doing here, you'll have a better grasp on how these will fit in and when it makes sense to update these things. But these are the 7. And I've broken this into 2 kind of categories. First is client acquisition metrics. This is what we talk about a ton on the podcast because this is what a lot of freelancers suck at and struggle with. And so I want to talk about these first. And then there is the fulfillment metrics. When you get a client and you're working with a client, what are the metrics we track within our clients and our projects? 2 different categories of metrics. Both are very important. First, we're going to go into the client acquisition metrics. I've got 4 here to talk through with a bonus one and some other caveats and things to talk about how you actually use these metrics, because it's one thing to track things. It's another thing to know how to actually use these metrics to better your business. So the first metric is tracking something we call marketing leads. I'll explain what those are, but this is essentially the seeds of your business. If you think about a garden, these are planting seeds, right? So when you're talking about marketing leads, this is like the earliest sign that you might get a client. You can call these a bunch of different things, but like these are people that are low intent. Maybe they downloaded a lead magnet you had. Maybe they signed up for your newsletter if you have one. Maybe they signed up for that first step in your 2-step opt-in process that we teach here, where if someone wants to sign up for an inquiry or fill out your pre-call questionnaire or your quote request form or whatever you have, you do a 2-step. That's where they fill their name and email in first, and then you capture the lead. That's a marketing lead. And then they put all the details about their project and their needs in the pre-call questionnaire or the quote request form. That's step 2. That's something else. That's a sales lead. That's next. But the first one is that step 1 lead. So the differentiation here is marketing leads are a lot lower quality. You're going to convert a lot less of those to clients. But this is a wonderful asset to have because it builds something called a mailing list, an email list. Many freelancers, the ones that I work with and that I know, this is a very valuable resource that they have. And it's one of our most valuable resources that we have. We have over 50,000 people actively on our email list right now. I think total like 150,000 throughout the lifetime that I've been doing email marketing in my life. Obviously, people unsubscribe or you clean your list over time for people that aren't opening emails anymore. But to be able to access 50,000 people in a moment's notice is a wonderful thing. And those are all what we call marketing leads. And this is what most freelancers suck at. If you're listening, especially for the first time, you likely don't have any sort of lead magnet yet. We have a whole lead generation series to go back to on the podcast. You may not have a 2-step quote request process or opt-in process when it comes to inquiry forms, right? Where that first step is capturing the lead. You likely don't have a newsletter or anything that's actually bringing in people to actually sign up for these things. So this is one of the biggest areas for improvement that most freelancers struggle with. And I highly encourage you to go back to our lead generation series. You can get to by going to sixfigurecreative.com/325. That's episode 325. We talked through the secret to consistent clients. That was the first part of I think a 4-part lead generation series. So great place to start if this is a number you know is like a 0, is a goose egg every month. That's the first of these 4 client acquisition metrics. The second client acquisition metric is sales leads. I kind of hinted at this before, but a sales lead is somebody who has directly expressed interest in hiring you. They have said, Brian, how much do you cost? Brian, are you available next month for X, Y, or Z? Brian, can I fill out your quote request form? Brian, can we jump on a call to talk through this project? Whatever sort of process you have for sales, I highly encourage people to follow our process, which is a pre-call questionnaire following that 2-step opt-in process where you capture the lead first, aka a marketing lead. On the second page, you capture all their information for a full contact form. So an inquiry form if you have a multi-step form for a lot of questions, or you have a simple form. It's just like, tell me about your project, what are your needs, what dates do you want, these simple things. Then they book a call to have a discussion with you. That's the process that we encourage people to follow and that most of our clients follow in their own businesses. But as soon as someone fills out that inquiry form or that pre-call questionnaire, or they book a call with you, or even in some cases, just DMing you on social media saying, hey, Brian, how much would it be for this? These are all people that have directly expressed interest in hiring you. A text from a friend even, or a text from an old client. These are sales leads. And these are a second big metric to track. If someone has expressed interest in paying you money, a repeat customer, a referral, a complete stranger, whatever they are, they found you through social media, they found you through ads, they found you through content, whatever. If they express direct interest in hiring you, they are now a sales lead. And you update that every month. How many marketing leads did I get? How many sales leads did I get? If marketing leads are seeds that you were planted, these sales leads are plants that have grown from those seeds. And that leads us to the third obvious metric here, which is clients are next. That's the fruit from these trees that we've planted with these seeds in our business, right? So we've got seeds, plants, fruit, the natural progression. Same with marketing leads into sales leads into clients. So when you close a client, track how many clients you get each month. Those are three very basic, fundamental things that you need to track every month in order to make more money. And there's a fourth metric here that's as important as the other metrics, because you can get 5, 10 new clients a month. But if they're all paying you $10, that's not a very good business. $100 a month. Ooh, 50 to $100. Ooh, no, that's terrible, right? So what do we need to track? It is a metric that we call our AACV, our average annual client value. Why do we say this? Not just say, what's our average client worth? There's too many different ways to track that. There's something called LTV. How much is a client worth throughout the lifetime of them? That's almost impossible for freelancers to track accurately with any level of confidence, because how many times does a client come back? They come back 1, 3, 6 times. It just gets really complicated. And I don't like trying to teach that to people. But also, especially for project-based freelancers, how much is one project worth? When do they come back to you again? They could come back to you 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, 16 months. They may come back to you multiple times in a year to do multiple projects. So that's what we track, what we call average annual client value. That is, how much is one client worth to us over a 12-month span? And the easiest way to track this metric is to just look at last year's income and divide it by last year's total clients. So if you made $100,000, just for easy round numbers, and you worked with 100 different clients, which is a lot of clients, that means the average annual client value is $1,000. If you work with 10 clients for $100,000, that would be $10,000 average annual client value. You can also look at the same over the last trailing 12 months, where you look at the last 12 months, how much money did I make? Last 12 months, how many clients did I work with? It's a little less accurate that way, but it's still fine. So those are the 4 client acquisition metrics that we look at. And the reason those are the 4 most important metrics is because if you look at each of those 4 steps or those 4 elements as the fundamental building blocks of a client, you can start to look at how we can affect change in that. And if you look at the conversion rates between each of those steps, we can start to see how we can affect our business. So when we see how many marketing leads turn into a sales lead, how many sales leads turn into a client, what percentage, and we multiply that client base by our average annual client value, you can start to do some fun things. You can start to predict revenue. You can start to say, I know that I got 100 new marketing leads this month, and I know that that's going to turn into 10 sales leads over the next 30 days, 60 days. And those 10 sales leads are going to turn into 3 clients. And those 3 clients are going to be worth $5,000 each over the next 12 months. So I know that this month I generated about $15,000 for the year. That might have meant that I only made $5,000 this month, but I know that this year I generated $15,000 in new revenue. There's a difference between revenue and cash collected. Revenue is how much did I generate potential revenue for the entire year, and then how much cash did I actually collect for this month. But let me give you some benchmarks to follow here. There is the marketing lead to sales leads conversion rate. And that means if you have a lead magnet, how many of those people that download a lead magnet actually book a sales call with you? What percentage of that do you shoot for? Everyone's business is different, but I've seen as low as 5% in a healthy, workable business, 5% of those, up to 32%. These are businesses that are actually generating a good amount of leads every month, marketing leads and sales leads. If you are a business that you generate 5 inquiries a month and all 5 of those were also marketing leads, so you have a 100% conversion rate, that's not a very healthy business. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about people who consistently generate marketing leads every month, consistently generate sales leads every month. They tend to fall between that 5 and 30% conversion rate for that step from marketing lead to sales leads. And why such a big gap here? It's because of the difference in models. Some people are really heavily building an email list with email marketing. So they're getting generally lower quality leads. So they're going to have less conversion rate there, but they can get them at a very high volume. So if you can generate 500 new leads a month to your email list, and only 5 of those become inquiries or sales leads, that's still 25. That's really good. On the flip side, if you are doing more direct offer focused things, like if you listen to a few episodes ago where I talked about what's working now in client acquisition, where you're directly offering your services, really the only marketing leads you're generating are people that are filling out the first step in your application, that two-step process that I talked about earlier. In those cases, you're going to have 30, 50% even or more of people that are marketing leads turning into sales leads. So that's why there's a difference here. It just depends on what your client acquisition model is. So if you're going a lead generation model route, shoot for that 5 to 10% rate. If you are doing direct offer route, you want to be at that 20 to 30% rate between marketing leads and sales leads. Hopefully there's some good benchmarks for you. This is getting into the weeds here for my more advanced people, but I'm hoping that this is valuable to hear the benchmarks for this sort of stuff. Next, we look at the sales lead to client conversion rate. So if the people who inquired about your services or filled out your pre-call form or booked a call with you, whatever you want to consider a sales lead here, what percentage of those should become clients? And this is another really wide range here. I'm going to talk through why that is and what you should shoot for yourself. I've seen as low as 10% work in businesses, which sounds really low, but I've also seen as high as 90%, which is really high. Funny enough, the business at 10% was making more money and was healthier than the businesses I've seen at 90%. Why is that? It's because if you are closing 90% of your sales leads, it's a really bad sign. We actually have an episode on this on why a high sales conversion rate is actually a bad thing in your business. And this goes out to all my freelancers out there who brag about, oh, I close every deal that I get. Every inquiry that comes in or every referral I get, I close 90% plus. Go back to episode 224, why your high sales conversion rate is actually a bad thing. Episode 224, you can get there by going to sixfigurecreative.com/224. I'll give you the quick rundown of that, just so in case you're curious, I'm not leaving you on a cliffhanger here. It's because if you're closing 90% of your leads, it generally means you're not getting many leads. You're getting what we're called like lay down leads. People who are just, they're going to close no matter what, right? The hottest of hot leads. And if you are closing that many leads, it means you're leaving a ton of money on the table. You should be getting rejected 1 out of every 2 times. If you're not getting rejected once out of every 2 calls, at least below that, we'll talk about sales issues that you might have. But if you're not getting rejected by half of your leads, that means that you're either not generating enough leads or you're not charging enough or both in many cases. So I tell everyone, if you just need a good range to shoot for, go for that 30 to 50% of your calls that you close or clients that you close. So if every 10 inquiries that come in, you close 3 to 5 of those. That's a good healthy ratio there. If you're not being rejected at all, horrible sign. Again, it either means you are utterly neglecting this front piece, the seeds planted and the trees grown, and also leaving money on the table as far as what you're charging clients. And that generally means you're not raising rates because you're scared to raise rates because you need every project that comes in, because every project that comes in represents a lifeline that someone threw to you because you're waiting around for clients to magically find you through Hope Marketing. And so you have to close everything. And so you can't raise your rates because you're scared you'll scare away clients. So think about the side where you have that client with a 10% sales lead to client close rate, right? Doesn't mean they closed 10% of their sales calls. That meant that they were getting so many book calls and sales leads that they were being very picky and cherry picking the leads that they actually wanted to talk to, which ones were a better fit for their business. And then they're only getting on the phone with 20, 30% of those. And they're closing 20, 30% of those at a really high average annual client value. And they're making very good money. That's a healthy business where you can cherry pick and you can be selective and you can be confident in your rates because you know you have plenty of leads in the pipeline if this one says no. Think about how much healthier of a business that is. So that's why in that specific case, the low sales lead to client conversion rate is actually a very good thing because they're weeding out so many people before they ever get on the phone with them. So those are the 4 core client acquisition metrics. If you track all 4 of these and start making changes to improve all 4 of these, we have episodes in our backlog. There's over 330 episodes now in this podcast. There is an episode for every one of these 4 metrics. For marketing leads, there's the whole lead generation series. For sales leads, we've got plenty of sales related episodes on the podcast. Increasing average annual client value, there's episodes on that as well. A good series to go to for increasing average annual client value would be episode 300 through 303 is a 4-part series called How to Set Yourself Apart from the Other 500 Million Freelancers in the World. What a title. There's part 1, 2, 3, 4. Go listen to that. Literally, that episode is a whole series on differentiation, how you can set yourself apart, how you can differentiate yourself from everyone else. And one of the biggest things that can affect your prices is how commoditized you are. Can I just go find another person offering your exact services at the exact same quality for less, especially overseas, right? I'm a business owner, right? I also hire freelancers to do some of the things in my business that I need to done, right? So I understand hiring people that are just offering a button seat service. If you're a button seat freelancer, you're going to always be pushed down on price until you've differentiated yourself in some number of ways. So go listen to that series if you struggle with that, and that'll help you increase average annual client value here. So those are the 4 metrics. To talk over again, is marketing leads, these are the seeds of your business. Sales leads, these are the plants that grow from those seeds. Clients, that's the fruit that sprouts from those trees, right? Average annual client value, I don't have an analogy for that. Someone else can give me a good analogy for that. but it just means how much is each client worth throughout the year for you. It's really easy if you're like a wedding photographer and one client's worth one project for you. They're not coming back to you 4 times a year. And it can be harder if you're like a family photographer. And it can be harder if you're a music producer like I was, where you have a client that comes in for a single and they come back a few months later for a 3-song thing. And then they come back 6 months later for another single. And they come back 9 months later for a 10-song album, right? That gets really hard to start tracking like all these metrics. But if you just look at it in a 12-month span, that's an easy way to look at it. Every year, I want my average annual client value to go up. I want my conversion metrics between marketing leads and sales leads and clients to go up. And that means I'm going to have a better business. Now, there's one bonus thing I want to talk through here that can help with forecasting your revenue. And it's tracking this metric called average time to close. This is a little harder to track. If you have a good CRM, it'll track that for you. But it just says, like, especially for sales leads, that's the easiest one to look at. Every time I get an inquiry or a sales lead, how long on average does it take me to close that client? For me, I know it's 23 days. So I know every sales lead I get today, I know what percentage of those sales leads are going to convert to clients in 23 days on average. And we live in a world of averages. So especially if you're generating a decent amount of leads where you can actually start to depend on statistical significance and not these wild swings because you have such small numbers, that gets really interesting because we can start to predict our revenue more effectively. That's why I was able to be within less than 1% of my revenue prediction last month, is because I understand some of these metrics. When an inquiry comes in, whether it's inquiry form or a book call or whatever, how long generally it takes to go from first contact there to I have the check in hand, or at least the client closed or the project started or whatever metric you want to track. To me, it's how long to the money's in my hand, because that's what I care about when it comes to actually getting paid. How long does that take? Is it 30 days? Is it 60 days? Is it 90 days? Is it 120 days? Some of you have really long sales cycles, especially if you work in B2B. Some of you might have really short sales cycles where it could be a number of days. If it's a 60-day lead time between inquiry to close, 60 days, that means if I'm not getting leads right now, I may have a great month right now. I may be making bukus of money right now. It's a feast month for me. Great. But for some reason, leads slowed down. But I don't feel it because I'm making great money right now. But in 60 days from now, you're about to have a famine month and it's going to hit you like a ton of bricks. And you're not going to realize it's coming because you weren't paying attention to the fact that this month was a slow month for you lead generation wise. So knowing average time to close allows you to level out these big feast or famine months that most freelancers struggle with, because 60 days from now, when you're having that famine month, it's too late to fix that. You just start drumming up business, and then 60 days later, you have tons and tons of work, and you just repeat the cycle. That's why so many people go through these feast or famine periods, is because you don't understand average time to close, and you're not tracking any of the other 4 metrics that I talked about so far. So those are our client acquisition metrics. All 4 of those are worth tracking on a monthly basis, sometimes a weekly basis. But now we get into fulfillment metrics. We got 3 more to talk about here. So once you get a client, you start a project, what are we tracking after that? There's an infinite number of metrics you could track in your business. These are just the 7 that I think are the most valuable to track. And this 5th one, this first one in the fulfillment metrics, but the 5th one overall that I've talked about on this episode, is average time to complete a project or to complete a deliverable, depending on how your business runs. I'll give you a couple examples here. In my studio, we would have bands come in, record a song, or I'd be mixing a song. Our deliverable would be 1 song. So I kept track of how long on average does it take me to do 1 song? Because if a client comes in for 3 songs or 5 songs or 7 songs, it's too hard to have an average per client because clients are so variable. But I know that per song, I know how much time it takes me to complete a project. And what that allows me to do is properly balance workload. So when clients would come in, if they were doing 7 songs, we would need a minimum of 14 days. 14 days a minimum on my calendar. And then I would have a 2-day buffer after every project, just in case we went long. And then I would take the next project and I would start stacking projects up. So I'd be booked solid 3, 5, 6 months in advance sometimes. And I had that scheduled perfectly so that there was buffer between. I would have project back to back to back to back to back with non-refundable deposits so that if they canceled, I still made money. And it allowed me to make sure my calendar was full without overwhelming myself, but also without having these massive lulls on my schedule with nothing to do. So I was maximizing revenue, making great money while also not getting burnt out. And I was able to do that because I could track average time to complete a deliverable for me. Now, some of you, it's projects. So like if you're a super productized service, you're doing like branding design, for example, there may be certain elements of that, or web design, for another example, where you're building websites. There may be certain things that can add on extra time or whatever, but on average, you would just track it per project, right? Or if you're making landing pages, it might be per deliverable if you're doing landing pages or funnel build outs. But once you know how long a project will take, and you can accurately put those things together, put together quotes or project timelines, you can start to, again, stack up projects or even stack projects on top of each other. So when I moved away from producing full-time into mixing full-time, it was basically a remote mixing service where I would get files sent to me from everywhere in the world. And I would stack those up on top of each other sometimes. I might have multiple projects in a day. I'd be doing multiple projects at the same time, but I was managing it properly because I understood my metrics for average time to completion for mixing. And I had a team then too. I had people that were setting up projects for me, people that were doing post stuff. And I knew how to manage all those pieces because I knew how long each should take. And I could be a damn good project manager if I do say so myself. You have to be pretty good at this stuff. Project management is something that many freelancers struggle with, and it's because they're not tracking time whatsoever. So this fifth metric, if you track average time to complete projects or deliverables, it allows you to do these sorts of things. It also gives you the data you need to set yourself up for this next metric, and that is dollars per hour, DPH. I've always called it a DPH. I don't know why. You can call it hourly wage, whatever you want. This is something that if you're a flat rate freelancer, you absolutely have to know this stuff. If you're an hourly freelancer, move away from that as quickly as possible. Go to flat rate. I've talked about this at length before. There is no great reason, unless you're just a butt in a seat, there's no great reason to be a hourly or daily waged freelancer. And I'll give you just one reason why, and that is the more efficient you get, the less money you make. The faster you complete projects, the less money you make. So you're incentivized to take longer. You're not incentivized to become more efficient, to speed things up, to hire a team, to delegate, automate, eliminate, mitigate any of the easy eights we've talked about. But when you do flat rate, the less time you spend on a project, the more money you make per hour. And if you can maintain quality, keeping clients happy, which is very important, it's the most important thing, while reducing your time load in something because you've delegated it to help, or you have automated certain steps, or you have systemized things to make them more efficient, you get to reap all of the upside. And there's plenty of ways to mitigate the downside of those clients that take too long because they're unprepared, or the project's a nightmare. There's ways to mitigate that stuff without eating into your hourly pay. But going back to number 6 here, dollar per hour for flat rate people, this is really important to track so that you know that for clients, for projects, for services, because not all clients, not all projects, not all services are equal. Some clients suck. An average project might take 100 hours for somebody. It's a pretty big project. So you know your average project time, and you know your average dollar per hour earned on a project. But then you notice this one client takes double that. They're super picky. They get in their head about things. They need a bunch of revisions, right? Now I know I'm either going to charge that client double or I'm going to turn them down. I'm going to fire that client. You don't know that stuff if you don't track these sorts of metrics on a per project and per client basis. You might also find out that service A over here, I'm making X amount, but service B over here, I'm making Y amount. This is not adding up. This is what happened to me in 2015. I realized when I did an analysis of all my data, I realized that producing and tracking bands in the studio, I was making like $70 an hour, I think, maybe less than that, maybe 50 an hour. It was basically, of the $122,000 I made that year, it was like $40,000 of that revenue, something small overall, especially compared to having bands living in the studio with me, fighting with each other, farting and burping and just being gross band dudes in the studio. But that's how much I made from that year. And that same year, I made like $80,000 or so. There's a whole blog breakdown of this somewhere. It'll be in the show notes of this episode. If you want to read the whole blog breakdown of the metrics for this, go to sixfigurecreative.com/332. My team will put a link to that old ass article on there somewhere. But it was something like $80,000 mixing. And that was where I could just wake up, work when I wanted, be in my underwear if I wanted, right? Take my time in the morning, sleep late, do whatever I wanted. Like it was my own schedule. I didn't have bands bringing me down my neck because it was remote mixing. And I was making $80,000 a year doing that. By the end of that, when I fully systemized things and hired a team, I was making over $300 an hour doing that. So sometimes by doing this dollar per hour tracking, you start to see certain projects with certain clients are just a no-no, or certain services I should just cut out completely or start charging more for. And so this is how we start to make our business more efficient. If you're doing less of the stuff that eats away at your soul, makes you less money per hour, get rid of those clients that are eating away at your soul, making you less money per hour, that are a pain in the ass to work with. And you start doing more of those services that make you more money, work with more of those clients that make you more money, or you identify like, hey, this type of client in this niche are worth so much more than that niche. For some of you B2B freelancers, you might find that like, hey, I work with blue collar businesses doing web design. And I realized if I work with roofing companies, they're worth way more to me because they make a ton of money for every project. They make 20, 30, 40 grand for each client that they put roofs on. But if I work with plumbers who are making $500, $1,000 per gig per project, they tend to beat me down on price. And I realized that these clients, I'm making a much higher rate per client. I'm gonna start working on more of those types of clients. This has a lot of implications when you start tracking these sorts of metrics that allow you to make really smart pivots in your business to have a fundamentally better business. So that's number 6, track your dollar per hour. And that's if you're a flat rate for your projects, like a flat project-based rate. If you are a day rate or an hourly rate, my free advice to you today is make the switch as fast as possible. And now we get to number 7. This is a nerdy / fun one. I'm going to run through some math, which is a big no-no on podcast. I'm going to try it anyways, but it's worth just talking over these sorts of things so you understand why your business isn't growing. something called annual retention. If you're on recurring service or reoccurring service, they come to you again and again. Recurring is like a retainer or a subscription. Reoccurring is just like they come back to you sporadically, project-based work. So for me in music production, that was a reoccurring. And then for me in like my software companies, that's recurring. The big question though is, what percentage of my clients this year will be with me next year? So this one, you might have to go dig into your CRM or through your emails, your inbox, or your spreadsheets or whatever to find this metric. But this is a really important one because this is how you actually start to stack clients year to year. And this is how companies grow. The goal I have for freelancers, everyone we work with, is you want 70% of your clients to come back to you next year. Now, obviously, this is niche dependent. If you're a wedding photographer, you're not going to have a high client retention rate, except if you look at something like wedding planners. That can be a really good referral source. You might say, what percentage of my referral sources refer more work to me next year? So there's still ways to work around this. If you can just think, how can I do this versus I can't do this because my business is a special snowflake and nothing about my stuff is ever going to work in other people's businesses and vice versa. Don't be that person. But the goal is 70% plus here. And it makes your life so much easier as you stack clients each year if you don't have to get a bunch of brand new clients every year. So I'm going to run through some math. I'm going to walk you through a 9-year what it looks like in a freelance business. If you just get the same amount of clients every year and they're all worth the same exact amount. This is an illustration because real life doesn't work this way, but you should still understand the principle here because a variation of this works in real life. But let's talk about year one. You're a brand new freelancer. You listen to this podcast. You're generating marketing leads. Those are turning into sales leads. You're having great conversations. You're closing 10 of those new clients a year. That's less than once a month. And those clients are worth an average annual client value of $5,000. How much did you make this year? Year one, 50 grand. Cool. Really good job. I made 29,000 my first year freelancing. So more than me. That was also 2009. So maybe it's the same equivalent now when it comes to inflation. But year one, $50,000. Cool. Reasonable. Year two, 10 new clients. I'm doing the exact same shit this year that worked last year. That's a good year. 50,000 your first year. I'm going to do the exact same things. Generating marketing leads, turning those into sales leads, having good sales conversations, closing them at $5,000 project or client values for the year, right? So I'm making $50,000 from new clients. However, 70% retention from last year. So of those 10 clients I had from year one, I still have 7 of those. They're coming back to me again for repeat work or cross-selling services or upselling to another service. So those 7 clients are also worth $5,000. So now I have 17 clients worth a total of $85,000. I've grown from $50,000 to $85,000 my second year. And you didn't do anything different. You just kept doing the same exact thing. Year 3, same thing. 10 new clients, retained 70% of our old clients. That's 12 old clients. That means we have 22 clients year 3. Those 22 clients are worth $5,000. That's $110,000. So we went $50,000 year 1, $85,000 year 2, $110,000 year 3. And this is where things start to level out. Year 4, we're at 25 clients for $125,000. Year 5, we're at 27 clients for $145,000. Year 6, 29 clients, $145,000. Year 7, only one more client. We're at 30 clients now. And this is because if you do the math here, you start to level out. You hit what Alex Hormozi calls your theoretical max. It's the line where the amount of clients you're losing every year is equal to the amount of clients you're gaining every year. So by year 8 and 9, we've plateaued at 31 clients, give or take. There's some point something percentages in there that affected this. So it's probably like 30 clients is where you'd hover around at about $150,000 to $155,000 a year. And in reality, you would probably fluctuate from $170 a year down to $120 a year, back and forth. Well, that just means you've hit that max point where you're losing as many clients as you're gaining in a 12-month span. When you track annual retention like this, and you know these sorts of metrics, you can start to understand how this can affect everything else you're doing in your business. Because if you've hit this plateau in your business and you're not growing anymore, and you have the capacity to take on more clients, you need to do one of two things. You either need to get more clients. Instead of getting 10 clients a year, we could get 15 or 20 clients a year, or change nothing else. You could also just make each client worth more. So maybe you raise your rates, or maybe you offer a second service, or maybe you have an upsell service or a cross-sell or something else where you make each client worth $8,000 instead. Let's do worst case scenario. You've raised your rates to $8,000 instead of 5, and you lost 1/4, 25% of your client base. So you just fell from 31 clients down to 23 clients. You fell that far in 1 year. But because you raised your rates, you are now up to $184,000 a year. You just had a $30,000 raise in a year because you raised your rates. This is the power of tracking your metrics. If you can do both things, if you're able to both increase the number of clients you're getting every month, increase the percentage of clients that you retain every year, increase how much each client is worth to you every year, You are unstoppable. That's how you create a freelancer that is making multiple six figures a year, especially in B2B space where you can actually make seven figures a year. We've talked about on this podcast, freelancers making seven figures a year as a solo freelancer. Pretty cool stuff. And in that specific case where we talked about that was Design Joy, by the way. If you're a designer, you probably already know. If you're web design specifically, you know about Design Joy, I'm sure. But in that specific case, he just had a really high average annual client value because he was charging a really high monthly subscription for his services. But these metrics are powerful. But metrics are just one piece of the puzzle. Yes, it's fun for some of people like me, like these nerds who like to get rich on Excel, right? It's fun to put these things in spreadsheets and say, what happens if I change this and that? If you're like that type of person, awesome. If you're not that type of person, you're better off starting to become that person because it opens up the possibilities of what's possible for freelancing. And yeah, you can start to track these things on a monthly basis or weekly or even daily basis if you want to get crazy like me. But what really matters is making sure you're actually filling that spreadsheet with clients. Every single one of those cells will need clients in some capacity because you can generate all the leads in the world that you want. But if they're not turning into clients, you don't have a business. And you can have clients, but if you're fulfilling terribly and they're having a terrible experience and you're not retaining them and they're not worth enough, you have a terrible business. So if you want to know how you can actually start filling your funnel in your calendar with leads and clients and start to make sure you can actually fulfill on the back end, this is stuff that me and my team can help you with. We specialize in helping freelancers build all the client acquisition systems in their business and track all the metrics in their business so they have a fundamentally more sound business. Almost everyone that we talk to struggles with these three things: working on the right stuff. You're spending all your time, effort, energy working on the wrong things, obsessing over the wrong things, studying gear, looking at the greatest, latest, hottest, cool new technique in whatever field you're in, getting better and better and better at your creative skill set, and utterly ignoring the fact that you don't have any clients or enough clients to make your income goals that you want. One of the things we do for all of our clients is we sit down, take a look at your business, do a deep dive on everything in your business, and come up with a full plan, a full roadmap of all the stuff that needs to be changed, fixed, added, ripped out of your business. And we essentially pitch it to you and say, do you like this plan? Yes or no? If you do not like the plan and we cannot revise it to where you want it to be, we will just part ways. You don't pay us anything. You go on your way. We are going our way because we know if we cannot shake hands on this plan, that this is the right thing to do, we should not work together. But once you approve that plan, then we go to actually helping you one-on-one implement all of those things in the plan. And that's the second area that people really struggle with is, yeah, I know what to do in my business. Here's all the things I should be doing, but I don't know how to do them, or I don't know how to not overthink this, right? So we work with you one-on-one to make sure that every single thing that you work on is updated daily, is done correctly, is done to the highest level for the highest possible chance of success so that you're not left just guessing what you should be doing in your own little bubble. We're basically holding your hand through everything. And the third thing is actually making sure you actually complete the plan. Many people, they start doing all these things. They may even do them the right way, but they never finish it. They have all these half-built bridges to absolutely nowhere. So we will work to hold you accountable, to make sure you finish the bridge. You build it from point A to point B so you can cross it to get where you want to go. And so many people give up before they actually reach the goals that they want. So we are obsessive about making sure that people we work with on their client acquisition systems actually see them to completion. And the whole point of this is so that we can build out systems that bring in those marketing leads I talked about in this episode, that bring in the sales leads I talked about in this episode, to help you close more clients at that 30 to 50% conversion rate that I talked about at a high enough average annual client value where you can hit your goals. And you're delivering at a good enough level where they come back to you again and again and again. And that's how you start stacking your income from year to year to year. Most freelancers have none of these things. They're just sleepwalking, wandering around through life, trying to just patch things together. And it's just not working. So if it's not working for you, if that sounds like you, just go to sixfigurecreative.com/coaching. Watch the short video on that page. See if it's interesting enough for you to take the next steps to apply. And if you apply, we'll take a look at it. We'll see if it's a good fit. If it's not, we'll let you know. Again, we reject more than half of the people that apply for this. But if it's a good fit, we'll talk you through our process. We'll jump on a call, see if you're really interested, and we can talk through putting that plan together for you. So that's all I got for you on this episode. Again, the website is sixfigurecreative.com, number 6figurecreative.com/coaching. You can watch the video on that page, fill out the short application, and we'll get in touch. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Six Figure Creative Podcast. See you next week.